It's a winter night more than 800,000 years ago on a cold, marshy coast in what's now England. You're awake, not because you want to be, because the cold won't let you sleep. There's no fire, not a spark, not an ember, nothing. No coat, at least not one you'd recognize as a coat. There's the wind coming in off the water, the dark, and a body that is, frankly, badly underdressed for the situation. And somehow, against everything your modern brain assumes, you make it to morning. So how does a slow, clawless, mostly hairless primate survive a night like that, with no fire at all? That's the real question, not did they have fire. The interesting one is what kept them alive on all the nights they didn't. Because here's the strange part. For a huge stretch of our story, our ancestors walked straight into freezing country, the kind of cold that kills an unprepared modern human in a matter of hours. And they stayed. No reliable fire, no down jacket, no emergency blanket folded in the trunk of the car. And they didn't just barely scrape through one bad night. They settled. They raised kids there. Stay with me, because the answer isn't one clever trick. It's a whole stack of them. Some of it is behavior, some of it is anatomy, and a few pieces of it are still running inside your body right now, tonight, whether you asked for them or not. Let's kill the obvious assumption first. We tend to picture it as a simple equation. Cold plus no fire equals dead. Fire is survival, and everything else is just decoration around the fire. It feels obvious. It's also, going by the evidence we actually have, mostly wrong. For a long time, scientists agreed with your gut on this one. You could not push humans up into cold northern Europe without fire. It was considered flat out impossible, a hard wall. Then people went looking for the ash to prove it. And here's the part nobody puts in the textbooks. The oldest, solid, repeated, unmistakable, yes, they clearly controlled fire on purpose. Evidence in Europe only shows up around 400,000 years ago. But hominins were already living up in those cold latitudes long before that. More than 800,000 years ago, on that same chilly English coast, they left footprints in the mud, actual footprints, a family-sized group, pressed into an estuary and preserved by sheer luck, which leaves a gap. Hundreds of thousands of years where people were surviving winters that dropped well below freezing, apparently without keeping fire on tap. Now, fair warning, because accuracy is the entire point of this channel. This is a real debate, not a settled verdict. Some researchers think fire came much earlier, over 1 million years ago, mostly for cooking, and that we simply haven't found the older evidence yet. Ash doesn't fossilize politely. A campfire from 1 million years ago mostly just blows away. So treat this less like a courtroom conviction and more like the best reading we've got of a very messy, very incomplete record. But here's the thing. Even the cautious version of the story is remarkable. Because for a long stretch, staying alive in the cold was mostly a body and behavior problem, not a fire problem. So the question stops being, where's the fire, and becomes something much better. How do you solve cold with the body you've already got? And below freezing is doing a lot of quiet work in that sentence. So let's be honest about what it means. We're not talking about a chilly evening where you wish you'd grabbed a sweater on the way out. Northern Europe in an Ice Age winter could sit well under freezing for weeks at a stretch, with wind that turns exposed skin dangerous in minutes, and nights that run long and black for most of the day. That's the setting. No thermostat, no hot shower waiting for you. No, I'll just pop back inside. Inside was the same temperature as outside, minus the wind if you were lucky and had a wall. So when I say they survived it, I don't mean they were comfortable. I mean they were alive at sunrise, which back then was the only review that mattered. Start with that body, because if you're going to live somewhere cold, it genuinely helps to be shaped like a radiator. Our cold country cousins, the Neanderthals, were built almost perfectly for it. Short, stocky, barrel-chested, shorter arms and legs than yours, thicker bones, more muscle packed onto a compact frame. There's a rule of thumb in biology for this. Animals in cold places tend to be chunkier, with shorter limbs, because a compact body loses heat more slowly than a long, lanky one. Long, skinny limbs are fantastic for shedding heat if you live in the desert. In a blizzard, those same limbs are a liability. They're just heat leaking out into the wind. A Neanderthal, by contrast, was basically a person-shaped thermos. Even the face may have been in on it. A big nose isn't just a big nose. It's a longer runway to warm and moisten freezing air before it hits your lungs. And here's the small, humbling detail. Those unflattering, stumpy proportions weren't a downgrade from you. In that world, they were the upgrade. Every inch of limb you don't stick out into the cold is heat you get to keep. But, honesty check, because I promised you one. Some researchers now argue that this whole body shape equals cold defense story is looser than it used to sound. Diet, health, and how a body grows up all muddy the picture, and you can't just read the weather off a skeleton. So we're not going to oversell it. A compact frame isn't a magic coat, but as a starting furnace, a thicker, chunkier build genuinely does help you hang on to heat, which is, evolutionarily speaking, a rare and pleasant case of your body actually being sensible about something. Okay, this is where it gets weird. Because you are carrying a heater inside you that you have almost certainly never once thanked. It's called brown fat. Most of your fat is white fat, and white fat just sits there storing energy, quietly judging your life choices. Brown fat does the exact opposite. It burns energy purely to make heat. No shivering, no movement, no effort on your part. It's a furnace with an on switch, and the switch is the cold. Newborn babies are absolutely packed with the stuff, which is part of how a creature that can do nothing else useful, can't walk, can't talk, can't hold up its own head, still manages to keep itself warm. And here's the surprise most people never hear. Adults keep some of it too. Cold weather wakes it up. And if you spend enough time in the cold, your body will actually build more of it. Like a house quietly installing extra radiators it forgot it had. Now careful, I have to flag this one. I cannot dig up a frozen brown fat cell from 800,000 years ago and wave it triumphantly at the camera. This is a reasonable inference from our own biology, not something we pulled out of the dirt. But the machinery is ancient, and it's standard issue human. It didn't get installed last Tuesday. So on those fireless nights, our ancestors weren't running on grit alone. They were running a small, silent internal furnace the entire time. The exact same one that quietly kicks on when you step outside in January and immediately regret leaving your jacket at home. You've got the cold plunge crowd today paying good money to activate this thing on purpose. Your ancestors got the free version every single winter. No subscription. Let that sit for a second, and then look down at your own hands. Because there's a reflex living in them that is pure, unedited prehistoric survival gear. When your fingers hit painful cold, your body does something clever and just slightly ruthless. First, it clamps the blood vessels in your hands shut to stop warm blood from rushing out to your fingertips and dumping all that precious heat straight into the air. Smart move, except now your fingers are freezing and genuinely at risk of damage. So your body relents. It opens the vessels back up, lets a warm pulse of blood flood in, then clamps them shut again a moment later. Open, shut. Open, shut. It's got a name, the hunter's response, because it is exactly the thing that keeps a person's hands working in the cold instead of seizing up into useless frozen claws. And you have felt this, that deep, specific ache in your fingertips on a brutally cold day, followed by a strange, almost pleasant flush of warmth. That's not random, and it's not nothing. That is a several 100,000-year-old thermostat, still bolted in, still on the job, still fighting to save fingers that are, let's be honest, currently gripping a phone. Your ancestors needed those working hands to grip a spear, to scrape a hide, to tie a knot, to carry a child. You need yours to keep scrolling and to check the weather app that already told you it was cold. Same reflex. Wildly, comically different stakes. The body doesn't know the difference. It just keeps the hands alive. And now, here's the part that actually did most of the heavy lifting. Not the body, the choices. Because the single biggest thing standing between you and death on a freezing night isn't your fat, and it isn't your fingers. It's whether you're smart about three things: wind, wet, and each other. Get out of the wind, and you've already won half the fight before it starts. A simple barrier, a rock overhang, a lip of ground, a wall of piled brush, cuts your heat loss dramatically because moving air strips warmth off your skin far faster than still air ever could. That's why wind chill is a number that can hurt you. Then, stay dry, because wet is the real quiet killer here. Damp clothing, damp bedding, a soaked layer of anything against your skin pulls heat out of your body many times faster than cold, dry air alone. A dry night at freezing is survivable. A wet night just above it can absolutely kill you. Nobody puts that on the postcard, but it's true. Then you build insulation without a single flame. Pile up dry grass, leaves, moss, hides, anything that traps a layer of still, warm air around your body, and you've made yourself a nest that holds your own heat against you like a blanket. And then there's the oldest, simplest, most reliable trick in the entire book. Other people. Bodies share heat, plain and simple. A group of humans huddled together, out of the wind, on dry bedding, is not a sad picture. It is a functioning survival system. Alone, you are a single candle in a storm, and the storm always wins eventually. Together, packed in, breathing on each other, you are something else entirely. You're a furnace with a heartbeat, which is a poetic way of saying that the prehistoric answer to a killer cold night was, essentially, aggressive communal cuddling. And honestly, no notes. It worked for a few 100,000 years. Your gym membership won't last that long. And where you put all of this matters just as much as what you pile on top of yourself. A cave sounds grim and prehistoric, but think about what a cave actually is. Solid walls that block the wind on every side, a roof that keeps rain and snow off your dry bedding, a ceiling of rock that quietly soaks up a little warmth during the day and gives some of it back at night. That's not a sad hole in the ground. That's premium winter real estate. Which is exactly why the good caves got used and reused and almost certainly fought over for tens of thousands of years. The prehistoric version of a rent-controlled apartment with a working heater and a view. Location, location, location. Even then, there's one more layer, and it's the one we tend to forget because it doesn't fossilize at all. The mind. Knowing where the sheltered spot is. Remembering that the north-facing slope is a death trap in February, and the little hollow by the ridge is not. Knowing how to read a sky, when to move, when to stay put, how to build the nest before you actually need it, not after. That knowledge didn't live in a book, because there were no books. It lived in people, in the old ones who'd survived 40 winters and could tell you exactly what this particular cold was about to do next. Survival gear you can hold in your hand is useful. Survival gear stored in someone's memory, handed down, taught to the next kid before the cold came. That's the thing that let a fragile, hairless animal live in places it had absolutely no business living. Think about what that really means for a second. A single human, dropped alone into that winter with no knowledge and no group, is almost certainly finished, furnace body or not. But a human, born into a group that already knew the tricks, where the shelter is, how to build the nest before dark, which plants still hold food under the frost, roughly when the cold usually breaks, that human starts the winter with hundreds of thousands of years of hard-won answers already loaded in. So you weren't just born with a body built to hold heat. You were born into a library. It just happened to have legs and a face and strong opinions about everything. But, and I would be lying to you if I skipped this, without fire always had a hard limit. Push into truly brutal cold, and behavior alone stops being enough. At the frozen southern tip of South America, in a place that literally got named Tierra del Fuego, the land of fire, the cold and the wet were so relentless that the people living there kept fire burning almost constantly. There, it wasn't a bonus. It was the line. So the honest version of this whole story isn't humans never needed fire. That would be its own kind of exaggeration, and we don't do that here. The honest version is this. In seasonal, temperate cold, a well-organized body and behavior kit could genuinely carry a group of people through the winter. In the truly extreme places, fire was the difference between a hard season and a mass grave. Respect that gap. It's the whole difference between a rough winter and a death sentence, and the people who lived it knew exactly which one they were facing. So picture that person one more time. More than 800,000 years ago, on a cold coast, no fire, wind coming in off the gray water, the dark pressing in. By every lazy assumption we make about the past, that they were primitive, that they were helpless, that they must have been one bad night from extinction, they should be dead by dawn. They weren't. They had a compact, heat-hoarding body, an internal furnace they never had a word for, a reflex buried in their fingers, dry bedding, a wall against the wind, a memory of where to go, and a circle of warm bodies that had decided, without ever needing to say it out loud, that everyone makes it to morning or nobody does. That isn't luck. That's a whole toolkit, half of it invented, half of it inherited, carried by people who were every bit as clever as you, just working with less. And the quiet, almost unbelievable part is how much of that kit you're still carrying tonight. When the cold makes your fingertips ache and then flush warm, that's them. When you shiver, when that silent furnace clicks on, when you drift toward the nearest warm body on the couch without even deciding to, that's them too. Same equipment, still installed, still working. They made it through the dark and the cold, one fireless night at a time, for long enough to eventually become you. 300,000 years later, you're still doing it. Funny how that works. So here's my question for you. Could you have made it through that first fireless night? And who would you have wanted huddled next to you when the fire wasn't coming? Tell me in the comments.